Paul West is a pop country artist. If his name doesn't sound familiar, don't worry, he's still upcoming. He regularly plays live at Mick Fleetwood's music venue. And last year, he dropped his first album, Eight Palms Ranch. There are 13 songs that are sure to make you have a good time. Today, in studio, I have artist Paul West. Hello, how are you doing
Hel-
today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Like I said, the whole entire time zone thing's a little wacky, but
Yeah,
we made it work. We made it work.
we did.
So, a little background for our listeners out there. Paul grew up in California, but he was born in Texas, and there are many different unique sounds that emerged from both states. So, my question is, when did you first really get into creating music? Did you have any outside family influence?
Yeah, so I was born in Del Rio, Texas, and then when my mom and dad were in the Air Force, they met in the Air Force, and then when they got out, we moved to California. I lived there for most of my life, and now I'm currently in Maui, Hawaii. We've been here for about the last 7 years. So musical influences. When I was about 12 or 13, I found my mom had a Beatles book of all the Beatles music, and the cool thing was is in the book itself, it had little pictures of what the chords looked like on the guitar, how you put your hand, how to play each a C or a G or whatever it might be. And so I knew the Beatles songs, I knew their melodies, and so I learned from that book how to play guitar, and it was kind of a relentless driving force for me. I ended up just playing guitar 3 or 4 hours a day. I couldn't stop. There wasn't anything per se that really drove me, but definitely some inspiration of growing up in the country in California. That 90s country music was definitely something I was into at the time. So yeah, that's really where it started, and I have moved through genres of music since then. But that's the start.
Super cool. Every time I think of the Beatles, I remember I had the Guitar Hero version of that, and it was
Yeah,
really awesome. It's like when I play guitar, I click buttons. You're playing real strings. And I was like,
yeah.
I think that's amazing, and it really shines through in your music that you've been at it for a long time. Cause when did you say you started playing guitar?
At 13, 12 or 13, I think is when I started.
Nice. So do
It's been a
you?
little while for anybody who's, if you're listening, I've had a couple decades to get better at this. So
Yeah, I was about to say I know a lot of people when they start a new instrument, if they don't show like progress right away, they get like disappointed or like fed up with it. But you said that like you just kept replaying because I think that's also a cool way to learn an instrument because you're learning through a book, you're learning with something that you're already interested in. And I feel like that's a good thing for a listener to take away is that if you start with an instrument, make sure it's connected to something that you I would guess say you're gonna enjoy doing for a long time because, like you said, you've had decades of practice now, and it's something
yeah,
that's really grown on you.
yeah, and I think I'm jealous of the generation now that would be learning it that in their teens or in their 20s that YouTube and the internet has given people all these resources to find how to learn how to play piano or play guitar, and it's right there at your fingertips on your cell phone or on your computer. Where for me, it had to come out of a Beatles book. There we had dial up internet at that time, so it was a while ago. So I'm a bit jealous of how folks can how much information is readily available to people these days.
So, a lot of country artists that we tend to play on Wolf Radio are well known, such as Keith Urban, Carrie Underwood, and of course, Taylor Swift.
Oh yeah.
Who are some of your favorite country artists that really inspired your style?
When you talk about inspiration, very early on, the traditional country guys, Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, and that sort of '60s, '70s songwriter. The Beatles obviously did. Tom Petty has always been an influence of mine, and I think he lives somewhere between the country world and the rock and roll world. He's
For
definitely a
sure,
rock and roll guy, but
for sure.
yeah. So traditionally, it was your classic country musicians. Now today it's different. Today I have a different influence of people, but that was the start.
No, the start's the most important part because that really, like you said, you're learning how to play guitar. It really shaped how you I guess, perform your music now? Because one of my questions is, how do you ensure that your craft really shines through? Is it like when you're writing lyrics, when you consider how you're going to play your guitar, or do you just start strumming away at your guitar and then the lyrics follow?
For me, lyrics usually come first. I keep notes on my iPhone open all the time, and if I'm doing the dishes or driving in the car and I catch like a good one or two lines, and I'll just jot them down really quick in my notes. And then typically what I'll do is that sometimes a song comes from the that one little single line, and then it'll sort of blossoms into a whole entire song. Or other times I'll take a handful of lines that I've written that came from different times, came to me at different times, but realize that they go together well, and then put them together like puzzle pieces, and then and find a song that works there. And I think that's probably most important, is to really stand above or have a good song. Is that it to me it starts with a story. That's why I'm a country musician. I think that great stories make good songs, and if you can capture people with what you're trying to say, right up front, right in that first few lines, and say something interesting and catch their attention, that's a good way to write a good song.
Yeah, we're talking about songwriting. You dropped your first album. It released in 2022, so last year, as I mentioned earlier, it's called Eight Palms Ranch. I would say the beat and the writing is really exciting for many of the tracks, like especially the song Hey Girl, but then it can get kind of nostalgic and relaxing with the track Did You Find Me? So, can you describe some of your inspiration for the album? Like, what really made you come up with the name for the album? How do you come
Yeah,
up with some of the songs?
yeah. So the album itself was 12 songs that I just think were the culmination of probably the last 10 years of writing. I've always wanted to make an album, a full length album of my own. And I had all these songs, and these were just the ones that were really at the forefront. They spoke to me the most. This isn't a concept album per se. I didn't go after a certain subject or design. These are these are just kind of my favorite 12 songs at the time, and ones that were really polished and ready to go. So yeah, I mean, "Hey Girl" is kind of just a fun, pickup truck kind of song, which is we were emulating the idea of what kind of country music radio is today, which is a lot of pickup trucks and beer and going to bonfires. And we at first we were playing around with the idea. It was more of sort of a playful, let's see if we can write a country song like what everybody else is doing, and smiling the whole time, and probably drinking beer at the same time too. But and then at the end of this, once we got done writing the song, my wife and I, which we I should give a little backstory. My wife and I are successful in our songwriting together. She's not a musician. She wishes that she was. She plays bass a little bit, but
Oh,
um,
nice.
she definitely has helped me with songwriting, and there have been plenty of times where we sit around together and come up with these songs. So "Hey Girl" ended up becoming this fun kind of just rock and roll bouncy thing. And then "Did You Find Me?" That song we wrote together about the night that we first met. So most of those
Oh.
details in that song are all about this night where I was on stage playing in front of a big crowd, and she was there in the crowd and was talking about me. And a friend of mine overheard her and said, "Hey, I need to introduce you guys." And we met while I was on stage. And so if you listen to the words of the song, it's sort of that whole dynamic of our first 48 hours together when we met.
Oh, that is so sweet. It's really cool that you write music with your wife. You guys, like I said, are like a duo over here. And I find it really interesting that you said you already had the songs pre-written, and the songs on the album are just the songs you felt they're like really polished up. So
Yep.
I have a question. How many like songs do you write at one time? I know a lot of people, like you mentioned how you jot down notes here and there, but a lot of people try to like focus on like one thing at one time. How do you recommend songwriters go about that process, just from your perspective?
There's two real ways that I think success happens with songwriting. The first is the traditional Nashville way, where they actually have professional songwriters that just get together in a round where there's three or four of them, five writers that get together, and they do it every week, and they go home during the week and jot down their notes and try to write songs, and then every Tuesday they show up and they sit down and try to knock out 10 or 12 songs. And what that is that's just you're writing all the time. So it's like you wake up every day, and you write, 2 or 3 hours every day, and you force yourself to do it, even if it's garbage, you write, and that sometimes that can turn into good songs. You find little pieces here and there, and then there's the opposite, which is probably how I operate more. Is I wait for a song to really kind of take life. It may happen on its own. It just kind of develops naturally, and that takes time. So for me, I probably have 100 or so songs that I've written, but they all take time. And one of my favorite quotes or interviews that I saw from Tom Petty, who I think is a prolific songwriter and could sit down and write a radio hit song in 5 minutes if he wanted to. But he had this saying that of all his A songs, so he had categories. This is an A song, this is a B song, this is a C song, based on how much he liked it or how good he thought it was. And he he would say, "Oh, this is a B song or this is a C song," and he had hundreds of them, probably thousands of those songs. And for most of us, if I had a B category Tom Petty song that I wrote, I'd be like, "It's radio, let's go." And Tom was like, "That's not even good enough." So there's, I guess, to finalize that, there's the always writing people that just force themselves to write all the time, and then there's those folks that just find a song here and there and they put good ones together, and that's me.
Interesting, interesting. I think that's some good advice that you gave to people. I know you said that you didn't really have like a theme for this album, but how did you come up with the name?
Oh yeah, okay. So when when I play music here in Hawaii full time. I'm at Mick Fleetwood's restaurant, Fleetwood Mac. If you should listen to them if you have not. One of the best pop bands of all time. But
Yes.
he has Mick Fleetwood's the drummer. He's super tall, and he has a music venue and restaurant that's here on the water next to the ocean in Maui. It's beautiful. You should come if you have not been. But I met the producer who helped me with the first album, Ed Stasium, who he was out here on vacation, heard me playing on stage, and thought, man, this guy's got cool songs. So we set up this whole deal. I flew to LA where he lives. He has a big home studio, and I was there for about a month, and we recorded all these songs. We had Kenny Arnoff, he's probably the one of the most famous studio drummers, the most recorded studio drummer of all time. So very cool to have him play on the record. And we had guys like Stevie Salas, who's played with Rod Stewart and is out playing with ZZ Top, and made Stevie Salas did a really cool documentary called Rumble, which is on Netflix. It's about Native Americans and their effect on rock and roll. So Ed had Stevie Salas come in and play guitar. And so, long story made really short, the album was recorded at Ed Stasium's home, and his ranch was called Eight Palms Ranch. He lives on this little mini horse ranch in California, and for me, the vibe is cool because I'm that country musician. I live in Hawaii, so the palm trees made sense to be relatable to the island feel. And then I asked permission from Ed Stasium if I could name it Eight Palms Ranch, and that's what happened.
That's such a unique story. I would have never connected those
Right?
dots.
It's so inside, man.
But that's okay. Now it's all coming together. It's all coming together. I see the palms now and everything, and how you connect it to also where you live. That's amazing. But
Yeah.
also, that's super cool that you got to record with all those awesome people. So, did you know ahead of time that it was going to be like that, or was it just kind of in a spur of the moment? He said, "Hey, I know some guys who might be interested in working with you."
Ed Stasium, he's a longtime music guy. He's a fantastic producer. He worked with the Ramones, the punk. His background is really the Ramones and punk rock music, but he's worked with everyone. He did Midnight Train to Georgia, so he was behind the engineer's desk pushing the faders up and down when she was recording Midnight Train to Georgia, and he's gone through the Talking Heads and Living Color, and he's doing Dolby Atmos mixes, so he's remixing all these classic records. So he just did Smoke on the Water. He told me that he just did Smoke on the Water, which is pretty cool. So he's this guy that I call him Uncle Eddie because he's just so supportive, and he loves my music. And it was him who reached out to Kenny Arnoff, he had worked with them, and said, "Hey, I've got this guy who in the world of music right now, I'm looking to change that, but I'm kind of a nobody. I'm this guy that just lives out in the middle of nowhere in Hawaii, and I play music for a living, and I've written some good songs." And I think Ed Stasium really recognized that and took me under his wing and helped me by connecting me with these musicians.
So, for people who might want to be interested in getting into their own music, how did you end up playing at venues? How did that really take off for you?
Wow. When I was in my early 20s, I think I'd just gotten enough songs together. I think it's helpful to start off if you're going to play out and play live. Start as covers. I mean, I support everyone writing and performing their own music, but to really get comfortable on stage, it's good to a know songs that you're comfortable with. So find, if you do a 45-minute set or something like that, find 45 minutes of music that you're really good at. And then also it helps playing covers in that you know the crowd knows the song too. You're not introducing them to a song that's completely strange, so or foreign to them. So that's a good way to start. And I think it's just getting out and playing as much as you can. For me, I think I don't even know how many gigs I've done at this point, thousands. And it really helps you hone your craft. And you don't have to do thousands of gigs to get good. It's just go out there and play 20 or 30 or 40 times, and you'll learn by mistake. You'll learn what not to do. And then quickly you'll build your confidence up, and then you'll be ready. And then you start introducing some of your own original songs and playing them. So I just say, that one day you just wake up and say, all right, I'm going to go see if I can find a gig or do an open mic or something and just get some stage time. And you'll know right away whether or not it's for you. You'll get that feeling of I liked it, even though it was scary, or I'm never doing that again. And that can happen too.
You heard that, listeners. Do not be
Yeah.
afraid to go to open mic. We have at our school campus a lot of open mic nights for aspiring musicians. So be sure to
Excellent.
utilize that because trial and error will take you far. And speaking of that, back to your album, one of my favorite songs on the album is called One Street Dream. And to
Mhm.
me, the song talks about everybody in a small town. They really know each other. They're all happy and content where they are despite everything else that exists. And it talks about some of the places that they visited, but always returning to this place feels like home.
Yeah.
And the reason why I like this song is because University of West Georgia, we're located in Carrollton, Georgia, which is a small town within
All right.
itself. We don't have a big population. Many people who were born here just go to school here. Obviously, they go to college here too, and now they work here. So my question is, what was your inspiration for writing that song?
Yeah. So going back to what I said earlier about how I write, I think I just found that line, "One Street Dream." I wrote it down, and I thought that's cool, like living the dream in a one street kind of town. And I sat on that line for probably a month or two, and then I finally started putting the pieces together of this story of this guy who lives in a small town, very similar to mine in California. When I was growing up in my teenage high school years, the town that we lived in was just this small kind of cattle town. We had almond orchards and cattle, and that's really all it was. And I felt like I could relate to the song. It's personal for me in that I grew up in a small town, but I wrote it about somebody that I don't really know. And it's just that, yeah, he started out at 30 dimes an hour, which is the first line. That's basically he started out at $3 an hour. And then, now he's the coach of the little league team. And it's just sort of telling the story of how his life has progressed. And yeah, it's a song that for me, it's really happy, and the way that the song feels, the vibe of it, it's kind of bouncy and light and feels happy and positive, and it tells a story about some guy that lives in a small town somewhere.
Nice, nice. And I like how you bring out how it's a little poppy and jazzy and, country music is tying all that in because I really get like a bluesy feel from some of your songs, especially from my second favorite song on your album, which is Something Stronger. I feel like that's
Yeah.
definitely a get up and dance song. And I really like it because it has like a piano and harmonica flair there. And so my question is, when you were putting all these sounds together, what made you be like, okay, this sound stays, this sound goes?
That was a lot of that was done in the studio with Ed Stasium when we were recording it. Each song, how we would put them together is I would record just a demo with a click track. So we put a click track down, and then I would just play acoustic guitar and sing it live, play it and sing it live, and then we would layer on more and more instruments and parts and pieces. And very quickly, you get the idea of, oh, okay, well, this is how this song is going to feel. What would be really cool is, and that happened a lot. We would say, oh, what would be really cool is if we had this piano that was like a honky tonk kind of, you walked into a bar and some guys playing honky tonk piano or whatever, and that it just developed that way. So when I wrote something stronger, I did it on an acoustic guitar, and it very much sounded like a upbeat blues song. It was very blues based. And then as soon as we were done with it in the studio and we had recorded it with all the drums and bass and guitars, it was a very lively, danceable, up tempo. It's still a blues song. It's a 1-4-5 blues song, but it has that up tempo, danceable vibe that's really fun too.
So, enough about my favorite songs. What is your favorite song from the album and why?
Hmm. I think my favorite. It's hard as the guy that wrote them and put them all together. You love every one of them, but my favorite for sure is the song "Heaven's Just a Step Away." It's towards the end of the album. It is a love song about my family, and it's probably the one that I think kind of strikes me the most in how I feel the most connected with the song. It's a story about the fact that every morning as a parent, as a father, as a mother, as someone that has to leave their family to go to a job or work somewhere, and you might not like that job, you might really hate that job. It's this story of longing about the fact that every time the door closes behind me and I leave my family behind, I really can't wait to walk back in the door again. And that's what the song is really about. It was before I made the commitment, or my wife and I made the commitment to sell everything, which that's a fun story too. How we went from living in California and me working 70 hours a week at a sales job to selling everything and moving out to Maui, and me in turn ending up being a full-time musician and doing that professionally. So that's really what that song is. It's that moment where every morning I had to wake up, make coffee, run out the door, and I couldn't wait to open that door back up again when I was done at the end of the day.
Well, that leads into my next question, which is what really made you pursue music? You mentioned how you used to work at a sales job. That's a very interesting jump to go from that. Because, like, what is your background, I guess, per se? I know a lot of people here at my school, they have different majors, but they're still interested in pursuing careers in music, even if they're not, let's say, a music major or they're not majoring in, like, audio engineering and stuff like that.
Yeah. The the background for me is that I had always played music. I taught myself how to play when I was 13 years old, and I'd always done it. I normally would always have some sort of day job in my 20s and 30s. If it was, I've had a couple careers, but I always have been in sales. It was something that I started off in my early 20s, and that was always the day job. And then I played music on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. I'd go out with the band or play solo, and it was always something that I did as a second job, second gig, or something that was just fun. And when my wife and I found out that she was pregnant, we had gotten married, and then we found out that she was pregnant. My wife really couldn't work that much anymore, so I took on the duty of being the sole provider, which meant I went into a sales job that it consumed the majority of my life. Out every hour of every day, I was either on the phone or in my office, just busy. And within the first couple months of that, my daughter being born, I never saw her. My wife would bring her into the office so that I could spend time with her, and I'd be on the phone, but like, hey, holding a baby. And one day my wife just said, I don't think this is the life that you and I want to live. I think you should pursue music, and I think we should move to Maui. She'd actually come out here on vacation a year or so earlier, and she knew of Mick Fleetwood's restaurant in Lahaina, which is the town that we live in. And she said, "You can play music there. I know it's going to happen." And she really was my biggest fan, and she still is my biggest cheerleader. She's behind me every step of the way, promoting me. So it was her idea, and we just said, okay, let's do it. And we sold everything. I mean, everything down to 2 suitcases, and we landed in Maui with a plan to have me play music. And here we are 7 years later. So it's working.
Yeah, it all worked out for you. I always feel like as long as you do something that you really want to do, everything's gonna fall into place. But it's good that you had somebody who was there in your corner, always saying, "Hey, you got this, no matter what. Do not worry about it." Because I know sometimes a lot of people will don't have that support because maybe outside pressure is saying, "Hey, you have to get a job, you have to do this, that, and that." So I like how you mentioned that you still did music even while while you had your sales job, you would still, like said, hang out with the band on weekends. And I feel like that's an important part of what people don't realize. Even if you can't dedicate 100% of your time to music or to the craft, even if you dedicate 25 or at least 15% of the time, you're still working at it, you're still getting better at it, you're still writing stuff down and playing your instrument so you don't forget about it. And also, like I said, as long as it makes you happy, I feel like that's more so you're gonna pursue it.
You know, something that I'm feeling today, and that really relates to that is that when you say that there's outside pressure, there can be people that say, well, you can't be a musician, you can't do that full time, or be an audio engineer, or go out on tour with a major headlining act and run lighting or sound or something of that nature. That's not what normal people do. And I have to admit that musicians and people that are in the music business, we're not normal, but I think that's one thing to always, if you really truly believe in what you're doing, don't listen to what other people have to say, because even now, for me, I've been doing this 7 years. I play professionally 4 or 5 days a week. This is what I do. I write songs. I'm making new albums, and there's still people that exist in my life that are like, "Are you sure you should be doing that?" and it's working, and so that will always exist. Don't ever worry about what other people have to say. Believe in what you're doing.
Like that, and you guys heard it here. And so let's talk about your new song that you have coming up. This song is called New Year's Day. I find the title really interesting just because New Year's Day, I think of New Year's as a new start, like new beginnings. And a little birdie told me that you wrote it as a tribute to your wife, so I'm loving this little duo thing going on. But the question is, did she write most of the lyrics, or did you write most of the lyrics for this song?
Yeah. So it's funny. We do get into this thing where between her and I, there are plenty of songs that we co-wrote, or I wrote 80% of it and she wrote 20, or vice versa. But this is one that is solely and entirely mine. I wrote
Oh,
every word and every the ballad, the melody, the whole thing is mine. And the official song title, by the way, because New Year's Day is actually on the Eight Palms Ranch record. We recorded it live. It's just me and an acoustic guitar. We added some ambient guitars and some things, but I always heard the song being bigger. I imagined it sounding fuller with an orchestra or with strings or something of that nature. And so my friend Kenny McNeil, who lives here in Maui, and he came out to a show recently, and in between one of the songs where we got the band on the stage and we're rocking and playing really loud, I go, I'm going to play this song called New Year's Day for my wife. And so the whole band leaves and it's just me and an acoustic guitar. And I think Kenny fell in love with the song. Shout out to Kenny for he produced it and came up with a lot of the arrangement of what you're going to hear. And so the official title track, or the title of the track, is New Year's Day Radio Edit, because it's Kenny's vision of what he heard, and he's done a great job with that, and I appreciate him for helping me with it. So yeah, so the reason why it's called New Year's Day, my wife still does. She bartends here in Maui, and on this particular at this particular time, it was New Year's Eve, and she worked until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Obviously, it's a big bar night kind of thing. So when she was sleeping in, I let her sleep in. I was hanging out with our daughter and making coffee, and I just kind of heard these words in my head, and I sat down and wrote the whole song kind of in start to finish in about 20 or 30 minutes. The whole thing kind of just came out, and I couldn't with the lyrics in the song, they didn't really lend to making sense for a title. So I thought, well, what better than to just call it New Year's Day, because I wrote it on New Year's Day. So that is the story.
not. I love how all your songs just had the most interesting backstory to them. Just like, well, this is because I stayed here, and this one's because my wife was working on New Year's. So just like, okay, here we go. But that's really cool how you felt like there was always more to the song, even after you put it on the album Eight Palms Ranch. In your brain, you're just like, I like this, but I know there's more potential in it. And I feel
Yep.
like that's something a lot of artists have to recognize, that just because after you produce a song, it's not really done. There can always be more stuff you can add, stuff you can. I don't know if I should say add. Should I say add or a bridge? Which do you feel like more spices up when it comes
there's
to?
there's no rules. So it could be add, it could be subtract, it could be just amend. Sometimes just changing a tempo of a song. If you do a song that is 5 beats per minute slower than really what it should, and then you move it, you speed it up just another 5 BPM, and it just takes on a new life with the song. So the Beatles were classically John and Paul both said that they didn't like most of the songs the way that they came out, and that's the Beatles. So I mean, as an artist, as a writer, you're never fully satisfied. There's always something more that you feel like you can do, and I do believe that with New Year's Day, it deserved to have all the things that the new track that's coming out on May 4th. Shout out to May 4th. It's coming out on May 4th. That it finally has all the things that I did here.
So, my last question focuses around I know you gave a lot of advice to listeners who record and write their own music. Is there anything else you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I feel like when you are writing, there's a lot of times that you'll try to write like someone else. You'll hear a song that you hear on the radio, Spotify, whatever it might be, and you go, ooh, I could write a song like that. And I think it's important. Sometimes that works, but the most genuine and the songs that I feel like are the best are the ones that you write without worrying about I'm not writing this like Taylor Swift, or I'm not writing this like Tom Petty. I am writing the song, and then whatever it turns into is how it's going to be. And I think for me that's helped me create more genuine lyrics and genuine music, that I don't have a purpose or an intention. I just let the song become what it is.
Yes, guys, please do not copycat. Be yourself when you write. No, I love that point that you made, because I do feel like I listen to a lot of artists who are on our campus, and I listen to their music and be like, oh, this sounds like so and so, so and so. Why does your music sound like that? You should make music that sounds like yourself. And I feel like you made a point talking about that's really how you got recognized by Kenny and everyone's, because they heard your music and said, hey, this is unique to him, and he has something going for himself, instead of trying to copy other people's stuff. Like, you took inspiration from it, but in the day you're like, okay, these are my songs, and this is something that came from me. So I have also put your own special touch in it in a way.
Yeah, and in the end product, if the song ends up sounding like, oh, you sound like Fleetwood Mac, or you sound like a Taylor Swift, that's fine. I mean, that emulation is the best form of flattery, but it's still that you're not writing with that purpose of, from the first moment that you put pen to paper, you're not going, I'm going to write this Taylor Swift song. You do it yourself, and then if it ends up working out to sounding like a Taylor Swift song, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just really being true to yourself and being true to the feel of a song without trying to meld it into something that it's not.
Facts, 100% facts. And so, for our listeners out there, on what social media platforms can they follow you?
Everything is Paul West Music. So if you Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, all the different things, paulwestmusic.com is my website. It's all Paul West Music.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. You guys
Thank
heard
you.
it here. Remember, be sure to follow Paul West and stream his album Eight Palms Ranch. Also, be sure to pre save his new song, New Year's Day Radio Edit, which will be releasing May 4th. Paul,
That's
thank
right.
you for your time. Thank you for coming on Wolf Radio.
Thank you, Melissa.